Okay, so welcome back to the Psychology Research Seminar Series, and this is the guest seminar by Dr. Flavio Azevedo, who's a senior researcher at the University of Cambridge and a Brazilian Fulbright Fellow, and of course is founder or co-founder, as it were, and director of FORRT, and you'll honestly, I'm part of the neurodiversity team of it, and I'm not looking at the full name and it's not jumping off but you'll share it. So and actually, for that matter, a shameless plug is just on Halloween. Monday we have in the APS Association for Psychological Science Observer have a piece that was published. So this is how, so I was invited by a member of the team, the neurodiversity team, and that's just one part of the work that FORRT does. Well, anyway, so essentially, off to you, Flavio.
All right. I take that everybody can see the slides. All right. Good. So, hi there, everyone. My name is Flavio Azevedo, and I am a member of FORRT and a co-founder, and together with Sam Parsons. And today I'll present to you our initiative. So, on behalf of the FORRT community, I'm delighted to be here and have the opportunity to talk to you about our many different initiatives and projects. And I would like to thank Stephen for his kind invitation to be a speaker here. And you know, I'm sure you get to devote your time to a lot of other speakers. So I thank you already for listening and hopefully contributing to how educators have been thinking about the intersections between open science or open scholarship and education. All right, so I'd like to start with the problem statement. So essentially, going to read from the slide, the teaching and mentoring of open scholarship practices, but also the transmission from researchers to researchers, so training, if you will, has received little to no attention at least when we founded FORRT in 2018, but even today, it doesn't, there's a lot less effort in this area than otherwise in other areas of replicability, pre-registration, system of incentives, and so forth. So as a result, it's still very common that graduates and undergraduates finish their studies without having heard about open science or open scholarship. And this is problematic in our view because students need to learn the status of science, right? So we like to think that whenever students are just taught the facts of science, they have an idea that science is consolidated, that science has a profoundly stable foundation in all its fields and subfields and disciplines. And we think that it's important to break that glass ceiling and teach the facts of science in relation to how these facts were acquired. So always teaching relative to sample size, generalizability, constraints, limitations, and etc. So essentially, we think that open scholarship is the most apt and developed tool that we have to teach students science through its processes. So that's essentially why the problem that we are trying to fix, and that's why we think that there must be an integration between open scholarship in higher education, meaning that open scholarship needs to be integrated into how we teach on our very core foundations of how we teach about general topics. So I'm a teacher in political psychology, so I need to apply the tenets of open scholarship to the way I teach, to the way I communicate facts of science, to the way that I treat my students and so forth. All right. So now moving away from this and just speaking of the scientific basis of why we decided to found FORRT. So the Center of Open Science, whose mission is to increase transparency, integrity, and reproducibility in research, has proposed 3 guideline principles to steer science towards this, what is called scientific utopia. So that's open scientific communication, restructuring incentives, and crowdsourcing science to promote large-scale collaborations. So essentially what we are saying at FORRT is that there is a 4th principle to steer us scholars towards the scientific utopia, which is the principle of familiarizing students and the future consumers of science and future practitioners of science inside and outside of academia, if you will, with the intricacies of open scholarship. So that's our 4th pillar, right? So in an effort to support the integration of open scholarship and its movement, its social movement to higher education, we propose FORRT, which stands for the Framework of Open and Reproducible Research Training. So what is FORRT, right? So it's an organization that started in 2018 in a hackathon at the Society of the Improvement of Psychological Science, known as ZIPS, where Sam Parsons and I were there. We got to a table and we thought, oh, nobody's thinking about this. Let's do this. So it's a very entrepreneurial kind of things that happen at ZIPS. So I'm sure you're familiar. There's many other amazing projects that ensued from ZIPS hackathons. And in this last 4 years, the organization has increased profoundly, counting today with more than 600 scholars in different academic fields. So we have representation in psychology, of course, but neuroscience, communication science, political science, computer science, philosophy, mathematics, medicine, librarians. There's lots of librarians as well. And, you know, one of the most important part of FORRT is that it's a volunteer-based organization. So all projects so far have been completed without funding. Therefore, any received funds would go towards, you know, driving impact and ensuring sustainability of our work. We do receive more like 150 visits a day. We have a great following on Twitter and maybe not so much on Facebook, but and we have lots of folks on our newsletter. Please subscribe. We send them out every 3 months. And we have major partnerships with organizations in the UK and Europe and in the US. So that's what we are. And just to talk to you about what are our goals. So our main goal is to build together with educators a path towards incremental adoption of principal teaching and mentoring practices. And by principal teaching, we really mean just the integration of open scholarship practices into your regular teaching. FORRT also aims to generate conversation about the ethics and social impact of education that is focused on openness, on epistemic uncertainty, on research credibility. And finally, the third goal of FORRT is to respond to the call of considering open scholarship as inclusive scholarship. So we try to promote discussions around the perceived importance attributed to different academic activities. For example, think how research tends to be overvalued to the detriment of teaching, to the detriment of service. So we are trying to have conversations about the importance of these activities and to advocate for greater institutional recognition of educational resources, producing educational resources, educating the other, having an open community, providing documentation and training materials for folks. So those are the goals of FORRT. right? So how do FORRT accomplishes its projects that are presented in a second? First, we try to put forward projects that are easy to incorporate, right? So they are devised to be very easy in incorporating one's existing teaching and mentoring and research materials. We also try to maximize the adaptability as well as make them fit in a variety of different contexts. So think of research intensive universities, but also liberal arts and community colleges, or just teaching institutions. So we try to have examples in our website that are not, elitist, if you will. Whenever possible, we try to make our resources dynamic. That is to say, we build on them. So it's not just, oh, this is what is out there that's done. So we try to have constant updating. So several projects are dynamic. So we have the FORRT glossary, which is dynamic, so constant updating. FORRT reversals and replication project that I'll present in a second, but essentially it's a collection of replications and reversals in social sciences, and the FORRT summaries, which is just a summary of open scholarship materials. So of course, all of these resources are fair, and that is to say they are findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And we are also trying to implement CARE, which is the equivalent of fair, but related to DEI. All right, good. So just to say that we have an approach that is meta-scientific. We are very open to citizen science, and indeed there's a few citizens, so non-folks from outside academia in our organization, and we have a team science approach to things. So for example, we try to set norms at a very early stage. So think of code of conduct. We explain our ethos in our getting started with FORRT. We try to, everything is open so people can walk through documents and endless documents within FORRT. So there's a very low barrier of entry in all our projects. So we want to be inclusive of folks. We try to leverage people's skills, whatever they have to give. And we use collaborative tools and documentations, and we try to be light on leadership, if you will, with a lot of communication. So that takes onus and takes a lot of work from project leads. But in the end, we are forming what we like to think of a community, and that has its advantages as well. So now I'll present some of the projects that we have. What we accomplished, if you will. So the first project that I'd like to start with is that is the FORRT clusters. So students of open scholarship and educators, they need to make sense of the literature that is out there, that is across several fields, crossing the interdisciplinary boundaries, and they need to be informed about what's ongoing and often dynamic debates. So this might be a tall task for a lot of folks. So we try to develop strategies and propose solutions to mitigate the effects of competing academic interests to help scholars reduce that time burden to keep updated with the literature. So we drew from the expertise of about 50 open scholarship practitioners and experts, and we provided this educators sort of comprehensive but straightforward framework to see open scholarship, right? So FORRT clusters is this sort of literature review that guided by educational, pedagogical, and didactic considerations that aim to provide a pathway towards the incremental adoption of open scholarship practices. And for example, cluster number 1 here, it has history of reproducibility crisis and credibility revolution. So you when you go to our website, you will find several reads on this topic. Then exploratory and confirmatory analysis, questionable research practices and their prevalence, proposed improvement of science initiatives on statistics measurement, teaching, data sharing, pre-registration, replication, etc., as well as ongoing debates, ethical considerations for improved practices, and so on. So this is just cluster number one. We have 7, and this is more or less what they look like. So this is cluster 3, just to show you another example. So this is more or less how it works on the website. In each of these tabs, you have the literature that is associated or resources that is associated with each cluster. All right, this is a visual representation of the 4 clusters, and everything that we do at FORRT, we try to have a visualization because it's often used as a tool. It's also often easier for folks to implement visualizations on their educational pipeline. All right, so the next thing that we try to do as the open scholarship landscape evolves, and scholars had to update their vocabulary often, right? So we devised a glossary, an access point for those wishing to learn new terms about open scholarship. It's an ongoing dynamic initiative that, provides concise definitions of the most important open scholarship terminologies. And a secondary goal is to clarify terminologies where different terms are used interchangeably or have different meanings across different fields, which is very interesting. And you can only find these sort of things whenever you're collaborating on a team science, right? Because, oh, is that what external validity for you means? For us, it means something else, right? So in any case, the glossary is a crowdsourced initiative. It included over 110 contributors, and we defined in the first stage over 250 definitions, and it's freely available on our website. We managed to get this publication in Nature Human Behavior, which is a victory to us all. And it's freely available. Everything is open access. And we present a brief definition of that is consensus based, that our team agreed on, then related terms, the references, and by whom it was reviewed. So FORRT is very keen on giving credit to people's work. All right. So phase 2, just 1 second, please. Phase 2 of the glossary, that it has been launched at the Big Team Science Conference that was recent, now is trying to expand the definitions to 350 terms. So everything will be 600 terms in the end. And we are also translating it to 9 other languages. So we are inclusive. We're translating into Spanish, into Arab, into Cyrillic languages, into Italian, French, German, Chinese, Polish, and I think that's it. Portuguese, yes, Portuguese, I forgot that one. All right, so it will be available in several languages. Great, so this is what we're doing. And by the way, if you do want to join the translation effort, do let me know, or do email us at info@forrt.org, because we're going to make a paper out of it. And if you contribute to it, you can also be an author. And Nature has showed interest again, but also did other outlets. So we are discussing this together with the community. All right, so the next initiative that I will present is the FORRT summaries. So to help those wishing to get familiar or stay updated with the open science literature, the FORRT community has prepared over 200 summaries of academic articles on a variety of topics, but every summary gets the article's abstract, its main takeaways, direct quotes when that is relevant, and suggestions of articles on similar topics. The quality of summaries is ensured by a community peer review process in which each summary is reviewed up to 3 times, at a minimum of 3 times per summary. And we have, you can participate as well, and we have a manuscript in preparation at this moment. So this is what it looks like. So the arrows are there just to show you, the main takeaways on the yellow arrow and the blue you could be interested in. And there's a list of other publications that, that are similar in topic, like think of a nomological network or community of articles. As well as on the right side, you have a list of all the summaries that we do have. And on the green arrow there, you will see that we make a difference between open and reproducible literature, if you will, but also of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we make this separation to highlight that diversity, equity, and inclusion and accessibility is very much part of open science, and we like to call it open scholarship because we think it's just a broader way to think of science and research, but also other means of acquiring knowledge. So we use the word open scholarship, but it's one of the ways that FORRT would be able to highlight this distinction. So another initiative is called FORRT lesson plans. And we thought that despite the growing awareness of the benefits of training in open scholarship methods, there remains a lack of systematic incorporation, and that therefore more educational resources were needed, especially those which are not open to everybody, and that has a width of completion, so to speak. So think of activities that last from 5 minutes to 10 minutes, 15 minutes, all the way through a 2 hours a lesson plan. So that's what we did. We had 9 evidence-based high-quality lesson plans and 60 activities put together in our page. And we also published a paper on this at the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning in Psychology. The materials there are really interesting, and I invite you to take a look. We are now opening calls for folks who look at this and say, oh, I would like to prepare my own lesson plan. So they join our community and prepare their lesson plan. And we review it with the community. We improve it as much as we can, and then we make it available to others. All right, so another initiative that perhaps is gaining a lot more attention at FORRT is I like to think of a meta-scientific initiative. So that the idea is that replications are at the core of open scholarship movement, right? And successful and failure in replications are quite important in informing and students about the status of the discipline, as well as new research projects. However, as replications projects go and become more widespread, it can be challenging to keep scholars updated, especially educators, with what is the status of the literature. So what we're trying to do here is to provide a replication list, if you will. And so we collated several replications. Just FYI, reversals is whenever you have a replication of an effect and you find the opposite sign. So if it's positive, it becomes negative. If it's negative between A and B, becomes positive. So that's what reversal is. So now we have 32 contributors so far from the academic community and citizen science, and 220 entries. And this is more or less what it looks like on the website. So for example, for social psychology, we have elderly priming. What is the status? So we found a reversal there on elderly priming, and from the actual finding. And we link the works that replicated this first effect, as well as we also include the effect sizes. And we have a lot of effects. Do take a look. It's very interesting. We are also working together with two computer scientists. We are sort of data basing this collated list, just so essentially collating the list in a way that can be analyzed to derive knowledge or meta-scientific knowledge as well. So we are in this process, and people will be able to use this data and contribute to this data, as well as research, research questions that they might have about the status of a given field, or do we have more replications, or do we have more reversals? What is the, essentially meta-scientific stuff. All right. Moving forward, another important initiative is that at one point after this, we started being a little bit more critical about our movement. And, we thought, okay, but what is the impact that teaching about open scholarship, about a disintegration? Do we have evidence that disintegration is actually positive to students? So this was one of the most challenging projects, because it's a lot of literature, many different areas of science. And there we use a team science approach with 75 collaborators worldwide to review and synthesize evidence investigating the impact of embedding open scholarship or open reproducible science into your teaching. So the paper specifically mentions the impact of open reproducible science on student outcomes. So we devised three main categories of student outcomes. So scientific literacies, so think of knowledge, skills, competencies, attitudes related to both scientific culture and doing science, per registration, reproducing analysis with open data, etc. So this is one cluster. The other is student engagement. So think of enjoyment of learning, motivation, future behavior towards science, concentration, effort, etc. And the other is attitudes towards science. So perceptions of science, trusting science, feeling towards particular practices. So those are the three main clusters. And essentially what we found is that there needs to be more studies. I think that's the best way to put this in. The low sample sizes of the majority of studies really do not give us the impression that we are sure that it impacts positively. So there's effects everywhere, but on a more narrative read of the studies, we do conclude that it appears that there is a positive effect. But do check out the paper. It's very interesting, well written. Check it out. It's that's the link on the bottom there. All right, so there's Stevens knows and is a member of it. We have this amazing project called neurodiversity. And neurodiversity is the non-pathological variation of the human brain on things like sociability, learning, attention, mood, and other mental functions. And we think that neurodiversity is a minoritized group of folks that have not received attention. So we try to combine open scholarship and neurodiversity movements to empower underrepresented scholars. So we do this in 4 ways. We are creating a database of research conducted by neurodivergent scholars for both undergraduate and graduate syllabi. We crafted a position statement of how open scholarship can benefit from neurodiversity and vice versa. We are also creating an experience survey, and we also are creating this alternative way to talk about authorship that I'll talk to you in a second. In any case, this is the link for our preprint. Do check it out. Essentially, we explain that neurodiversity is fundamental to understanding human behavior and cognition. We argue that neurodivergent individuals often are stigmatized, devalued, and objectified. We present the perspectives of neurodivergent authors, the majority of whom had lived experiences of neurodivergence, but also of stigma, devaluation, objectification. And we discuss how research and academia can, and most definitely should, improve its practices when it comes to inclusivity and diversity. We described in the paper systematic barriers, the issue of disclosure, directions on prevalence of stigma, and we also talk about the intersection of neurodiversity and open scholarship. And we provide recommendations that can lead to personal as well as systematic changes to improve acceptance and inclusion of neurodivergent individuals. All right. In the preprint, but we're also working on a standalone piece now. We are thinking, just one sideline. On the left side of your screen, I think, the one with 4 balls. Let me put my cursor in it. 1 second. Here is just essentially how it's a graph that aims to show folks how we think of open scholarship, social justice, and neurodiversity. So how are these things connected? But we make this argument in the paper as well. All right, on your right, essentially this is an academic view of privilege, and this is an exercise for academics or a didactic tool for us to think deeply or more deeply about the privileges that we hold. Which hopefully can increase our ability to be critical of the ways that we currently think of authorship and merit in academia. We use this view of privilege in this paper in particular to have this reflection and to decide the authorship order. So we didn't do it by the so-called merit-based form, like, oh, who wrote more, because these things are very difficult to assess anyways, but also doesn't take into account, opportunities, privilege, intersectionality, and a lot of other aspects that are extremely important. All right. Moving forward to another initiative, we have the FORRT pedagogies. So we are collecting and cataloging exemplary instances of principal education. So that is, excellence in teaching and mentoring. And these pedagogies encompass reflections on how to best teach, how to best approach the teaching of open scholarship to students and its integration in higher education. So, so far we have now with Julia Strand, who shared all her materials. So one of the major goals is to put the highlight on amazing educators, like an award, but also to share their materials and so that folks can adapt to their own environment, to their own course. So if you have somebody else's skeleton, you can adapt and you can make the modifications that you need. We are finishing now with Gilad Feldman-Feely, our pedagogies, and we are also contacting folks in Glasgow from PsychTeachR. They will be the next folks, and if you want to recommend folks, please go to our pedagogies page and send us an email about who you think that should be next. All right, now it's going to get a little faster because the initiatives are more straightforward. So we also have a FORRT syllabus. FORRT syllabus is just, our community syllabus, which is open to you. If you feel like teaching open scholarship at your institution, it's a GDoc, it's editable. You essentially download it, it's ready. You make the adaptations, you put your name in, you put your class times, etc., and you're good to go. It consists of 9 ideas for seminars, including suggestions of core and additional readings, students for assignments, for hands-on experience on open scholarship practices. The syllabi is made to be very dynamic. such that seminars independent of each other are possible and easily incorporable into your own class. We also have a curated, oh, just one thing about this. We also have, I think, in this page, 100 and I want to say 20 other syllabi from other folks and course materials. So together with the FORRT syllabus, you also have, you know, just a gazillion other syllabus on several topics related to open science. All right, the curated list of resource is just a gazillion other different resources. We have a submission form, and what we try to do when we receive a submission for a given resource to be listed in our website, we try to enrich it with more either metadata. We try to find it, to make it more findable to folks, right? All right. We also have a variety of social justice oriented initiatives. We have FORRT open office hours. We have partnerships with Nowhere Lab. We have a remote mentoring and mentorship program. So if you are at an institution where there isn't anybody who knows open science or that can mentor you on your master thesis, PhD thesis, we have a mentorship program. We have several students as well as mentors that, you know, we partner up, essentially like a coupling thing. And we also provide support for underrepresented and underprivileged ECRs. All right. So lastly, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how a project comes to reality at FORRT. So after sharing, you know, everything that we talked about, we would like to share a little bit about the processes. So anyone at FORRT or anyone from, you know, that joins our Slack community can propose new ideas. This is done via one channel that we created on Slack with this specific purpose. It's called Team Ideas. And if the idea is sound and approved by community, there's a review process. It gets assigned to a project lead who will oversee the execution of this idea. And normally so far, but not all cases, the person providing the idea ended up leading the project. But that's together with other FORRT members. But in one case, they couldn't lead it and we took it over. Good, our community, members of our community. The idea is then shared on FORRT main channel. For that, we create another channel for that specific project as well, and where we communicate and exchange ideas. So Team Neurodiversity was created in this manner. And today there is a chat within our FORRT Slack called Team Neurodiversity. So over time, we hold meetings specific to that project to oversee its progress, if it's one project. But for example, Team Neurodiversity has at the moment 11 projects. And what is amazing is that they are, I think, maybe the more, if not the second most active project, and especially when it comes to delivering, it delivers one work after another. It's an amazing team. In any case, when a given project is ready or close to ready, we add it to our website to ensure it's findable to everyone who is interested. We also try to spread the output on social media, mainly on Twitter and on Reddit, sometimes on Facebook. And you know, the last stage is that dynamic phase that I talked to you about, which is that a team of people, often coordinated by the lead project, you know, try to write a paper, right? So there is a scientific output that people can, you know, that can be cited for their work. We are also working on finding funds for folks to be able to do this work, not only in a voluntary basis. And then it enters this dynamic part in which after these two things are done, meaning that the resources are shared on the website, it's useful to the community. There is an article that can be cited to credit folks' work. We make this dynamic in the sense that, you know, things get improved upon. All right, that's it. Those are the links of our FORRT. if you want a invitation for our Slack community, I'll post one on the chat. And I am very open to any questions you may have.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. And it's amazing to see how much impact you've had already. And I see and how FORRT provides something that so many of the people on the neurodiversity team, I can say from experience, many of us are fairly early career researchers. Some of us are people of color, and just across the FORRT team, you've been able to get into some of the highest impact journals and including with a lot of, conceptual work as well. And so it's very impressive. And it kind of shows how people of different neurotypes, can work together and be productive. And I want to see if anyone has any questions and defer to any guests if you have any questions. Well, are you familiar with the REF, the Research Excellence Framework? Flavio, because
yes,
with the the elements of rigor, originality, I think the third is significance, essentially impact. It just seems. Sorry, what was that?
No, it's we got a prize from the Hidden REF initiative. So after REF in the UK, there is this initiative called Hidden REF, and to highlight the limitations of the REF, and we got a prize from them. So that's how we know.
And yet, ironically, this research could together be a huge impact project, or could be through the significance and, could actually be, but it looks, there are many critiques of the current system, and part of the work of this is to kind of overhaul and reform, revolutionize some of current practices.
Yeah.
But
sure.
So
Matt, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you very much, Flavio, for a really interesting talk. And just well, I've been glancing through the FORRT website in the background. I sort of was aware of what you were doing, but also it's just incredibly comprehensive, and there's an awful lot there. My questions are like a little bit about just sort of understanding, I guess, kind of maybe your background and how you sort of got involved in open science. And then I guess around that is just then also kind of how you encourage or even just sort of mentor colleagues who are completely new to open science in terms of getting involved. So maybe in terms of just that first question, kind of what's your, like, what was the sort of motivator for you that got you interested in open science and sort of set you on that path, if you like?
All right, talking a bit about my background. Ali, just because there's a comment there, I'll send the Slack. If this is not working, I'll send it another one, and Stephen can forward to folks. Okay, but that should work. Just let me know if it doesn't work. All right. A little bit about background. So I'm Brazilian, and I come from a low socioeconomic status background. And I think I'm the first one in my family who finished high school. So getting educated for me was always very important. But in that process, I noticed that a lot of the most important resources are behind a paywall. And this idea of accessibility was always present in my life. And when I learned about open science and reforming science, I always thought, oh, that's fine. It's important that we reform our methods, and it's important that we have a more reliable science, but we also need to teach better our students when it comes to the facts of science. We are teaching students as if there is this colossal, structure of something that they cannot touch. Maybe this is how I feel, or low socioeconomic status people feel, like they can never be or dream of becoming a scholar. And when I learned about the open scholarship movement, I found out that no, I can have my own contribution as well. So it's important that we teach, I think, open research or open scholarship practices together with how we teach students the effect of sciences in our specific disciplines, in this sense, to also help put up and decrease the barriers to folks and how we teach them. So this is more or less my background and the why I think FORRT or anyone's teachers' initiatives and try to be principled about their teaching is important. Now, how I try to teach, I think that or how to mentor folks is always in light of DEI, right? We need to be, especially in today's world, we need to be very keen on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think that this is the biggest gap in our science today, not only when it comes to our regular teaching, but what we value in science, and the need for, or a cognitive need of that, the sole genius or the genius scholar, or instead of a community of people coming together to accumulate knowledge, if that makes sense, or that different people have different abilities and have different strengths that can, cooperate together towards a larger goal. So essentially, we're advocating for a more equitable academia as well. So I think that plays into that mentorship role. Yeah. Did I answer your question, Matt?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it's yeah. I mean, I think just for me personally, I think I've always had a like a want to kind of adopt open science practices, but it always often just can feel quite daunting. But then it's just that thing of once you start to get involved, then actually those kind of layers of kind of self-doubt that you might have about getting it right start to disappear. But yeah, I can see a couple of other questions on
just to say something about this, Matt. I think that open science should be seen, and this is not my idea, this is Bergman's idea. It's a scholar from Germany. Should be seen as a buffet of sorts, in which you do a part that you can do, right? So, I like open data. And if you can release your data, if your data doesn't contain, if you're not in violation of the norms and rules of disclosure, for example, you open your data when possible. But sometimes you're like, I like to pre-register, I like to do a register report. So just thinking of open science as a buffet that you can feed off one plate and not everything is a good way to think about open science. Kim, would you like to go first?
Sure. What a fantastic talk. Thank you so much. I love the way that you can incorporate sort of the openness about researchers and citizen science with the openness of the reporting of science. It's fabulous. I did want to sort of query, however, something that you said was one of your core assumptions about the replicability of findings. I think that might lead us, in fact, to a place that we may not actually really want to go. I think in some experimental kinds of science, we're looking for absolute human universals. But I'm a developmental scientist, and typically we're not looking for, because we're not going to find universal study by study. We're going to build up a puzzle, actually inclusive kind of feeling for what development is that's very contextualized. So I wondered if you could just speak a little bit about that being your core idea of replicability.
So I think I think I might have misspoke. So replicability is integral to the open science movement, right? So it started in a way about the lack of replicability of findings historically. And then it said, we need a problem. We have a problem. We need a reform, right? So that's more or less how we went. And the way that it did, it was through, and this is extremely important, methodological reform, right? And a lot of this methodological reform was, publicized in a very aggressive way, if you will, especially on social media, and in a very positivist way as well. Positivist, the philosophy of how to acquire knowledge, positivism. Now we are hopefully we are at a stage where we're more open to other ways of acquiring knowledge and seeing the origins of this lack of replication. So now there is the theory crisis. Oh, it's actually theory. Well, there's the measurement crisis. There is the methodological crisis, but there is the lack of diversity. So there's a lot of other issues that are at play. And now more than ever, and thankfully, we are seeing more and more pieces that are critical, but extremely cogent and rational about how replication isn't a solution for all the malaise that we have in our science. So I think that this is extremely important to convey. It is the view of FORRT that replication isn't a tool for us all, and in many fields and different areas it doesn't apply, so to speak. But at the same time, as a qualitative researcher, as a quantitative researcher myself, I can't speak too much of this, but in my meetings with and working together with qualitative researchers, we can also apply certain areas of open scholarship to qualitative research and to other forms of knowledge acquisition and accumulation. So I think what we need is a different discourse and a different framing on the movement that is a little bit more diverse and inclusive, for and foremost, that takes an approach that is more, I'll say that again, inclusive of other people's perspectives, because, we try as much as possible to not fall into the trap of, we call it bro open science. I don't know if you heard of that term, but that idea that toxic masculinity unfortunately has driven a lot of this scientific reform debate, especially when attacking publicly and on social media earlier scholars, their work or their methods, and etc. So we absolutely do away with that, and even our reversals and replications project. One of its not goals, it's not a goal, it's just a plus on it. We can provide a database of replications that is not tainted by how to say that broken science perspective. Kim, I hope I answered your question, but if you have any follow-ups, let me know.
And we have 3 minutes till the end of the hour. I certainly have, and a few of us have a meeting at 2. So if we could try to squeeze in the last 2 questions, and starting with Hartmut, since his hand's been raised longer. Thank you.
Hi. I enjoyed your talk and the discussion, and particularly welcome what you said just now about trying to avoid this toxic open science approach. And I agree there was probably an element of that. Related to that, something that intrigued me in your talk was, maybe you can quickly just go back to that slide. It was to do with a comment on cortex. I forgot the context in which it was made, but there were several points that were raised there. They were probably meant to be ironic. One of them said that, you know, we are a journal that welcomes spectacular and sexy findings that increase our readership or something. And in that context, also, there was a statement to the effect of editors prefer studies with interesting findings or something, or interesting new spectacular findings. Well, I'm an editor. I don't do that. So I wonder why, I wonder what the evidence behind that is. And, you know, just on the basis of what you just said, trying to avoid that toxic open science. So maybe there's still a bit of an element in that.
All right, so I can speak of a few papers showing that there is a culture of novelty over replicability or integrity or openness, right? You can find a lot of them, but I'm happy to send you on our summaries page or in our FORRT clusters, but I'm happy to send it to you as well via email. There's quite a lot of evidence on that, thankfully. However, it's important that we
whether that is really due to the editors or to the authors that prefer to send papers with interesting findings to the journals. You know, it's a bit of a chicken and egg problem there.
Exactly, because culture,
it's probably rooted in the whole culture.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
That is also an element that probably could be emphasized more strongly, that many of these problems, well, that's my view in any way, many of these problems that we have regarding non-replicability of results and so on, they are as much a function of questionable research practices as of the general scientific context in which research takes place, so that research is seen more and more as a career and so on. And there are financial,
but there is a differential of
with it.
There's a differential of power, right? So editors have a lot more power than do authors. So it's because of that differential power that a lot of weight is put on there. And because of this power, it's thought that they help shape. And indeed, there was a lot of written evidence when it comes to rejection letters and whenever you submitted papers, etc., that there is that influence. But what is important, Harmit, is that it's not you. You're not the problem. The problem is the system, right? And there's good elements and bad elements in everything that we do, and every aspect of historical of human kindness. You know, just we're a community, right? So it's important that it's definitely not you. And it's great to have you as an ally, but this is a system problem. And by changing the culture that we are able to.
Of your message, so I mean, if I was interpreting that correctly, that slide that I saw, then it's also a message to you to be a bit more careful in how you spin that message and not to piss off people who might otherwise be on your side.
I think so. I want to agree with you. Yeah, we are trying to provide a more critical approach to open science. I think so that's our goal. Ale, did you have a question? Maybe I can help answer.
We don't have the time now, but I appreciate it. It was to do with like explaining the considerations that you have for authorship. But I appreciate that Stephen is trying to finish the meeting soon. Thank you.
Flavia, do you mind? I have a couple of questions. Do you mind if we stay on the call for a couple more minutes? I know that the others might want to join a different meeting.
If I were to go in person, but I would need to stop the recording and then go in person rather than switch to online. But
Stefano, do you think that you can
so if I stopped recording and I allowed,
yeah, I'll send you an email. Cool.
But stop recording then.
But thank you so much for the talk. Honestly, it was so good. And I've been going through the website the whole time. So I want to extend the thanks to your work, not just the talk. Like, it's absolutely amazing. I've been looking for a website that has all the information in one place for years. And now I found it. So thank you.
Thank you.
But yeah, I'll send you an email.
And yes, you're available for email for any outstanding. I'm sorry I've mismanaged time or if it's just that there's so much interest, but thank you very much. And it's a brilliant talk and interesting discussion. So thank you, and I'll stop the recording.